Generation Z, those aged 13 to 28, were born into a country that expects little of them. And Zoomers, in turn, expect little of the country. We've been told how fragile, timid, and woke they are, often scorned by parents who take little responsibility for their children's failures. And yet, it is the Zoomers who are America's unlooked-for saviors. The revolution that will restore the United States to greatness and goodness begins with its youngest, the final victims of the corrupt gerontocracy and the future leaders of the true American century to come. We're privileged to speak today with such a young heroine, Hannah Faulkner, a powerful voice for truth shaping tomorrow's America. Hannah, thank you for joining Restoration Spotlight.
Hey, how are you doing?
One of the things that marked the millennials, and I'm a millennial, is our eager buy-in to a system that ultimately failed us. You know, universities were supposed to propel millennials into high-powered jobs that would turn us into homeowners, the bedrock of the middle class. Instead, that system indebted the largest generation in history, just as leftist lies and Obama's false promises twisted and ultimately burned us out. But you know, what's long stood out to me about Gen Z, and you're a Gen Z Zoomer, is how little confidence they have in that same system. They're not buying what the older generations are selling, which means they're casting about for a new direction, for a new purpose. Now, Hannah, you're one of the few that are offering your generation that kind of guidance, aren't you?
Oh man, you're right. It's pretty insane, the issues that we're fighting on a daily basis. I am blown away every single day I wake up. You get on X, you get on all of the different news sites, liberal, conservative, in the middle, and it is just mind-blowing every single day. But also just with the knowledge that we are fighting a spiritual battle as a Christian. This is a spiritual battle between good versus evil. This is more than just a culture war or a political war that we're in. This is a spiritual battle. And so understanding that nothing is new under the sun. But yes, I am very hopeful right now. I feel that we're almost seeing a turning point in American history right now, with young people finally recognizing that it is their civic duty to get out to the polls and to vote. I mean, we saw the last election with President Trump in 2024. Young people were finally recognizing that the left is not prioritizing their wants. The left is not prioritizing the American dream. But more than that, they need to vote in the first place. And of course, taking it the step further and thinking critically on who they're going to vote for. So it's a mix of emotions right now in this spiritual battle that we're in. But I am very hopeful. You know, as I travel to college campuses and I travel the country, and I've even gone out of the country talking to people and young people specifically, sometimes you feel like, man, I don't know what's going to happen next. But at the end of the day, I'm very hopeful seeing all of these young people and frankly, all generations, because, you know, truth doesn't apply just to young people. Truth doesn't apply to 80-year-olds or elders. No, truth applies to everyone, regardless of your age, your ethnicity, or where you come from. So obviously, our goal is to wake up the young people, because they are the next generations. And if they do not understand our enemy, if they do not understand what's up against, what we're up against, then, you know, of course, they're just sitting ducks ready to be, you know, hit like a target from, you know, a military perspective. But even from a cultural and national sovereignty perspective, you know, of course, we want to educate and equip the younger generations to get involved. But all generations, we need every single generation: parents, grandparents, great grandparents, and even the Gen Alpha, which is the one right under me. It's crazy.
Yeah. Those would be my children, actually. You know, what's remarkable to me is that Gen Z is probably the most targeted generation for political indoctrination of anybody at any time in the United States in all of our history. And yet, you know what, Charlie Kirk, and we're recording this in the wake of his incredible memorial. One of the things he showed is that actually Generation Z is very open-minded to talking with people who don't agree with them. There's this level of open discourse between left and right that you didn't see in older people, because of course we get hardened in our views. Now, unfortunately, I do think that's changing, or maybe it is fortunately it's changing in the wake of his horrible assassination, because you're seeing people realize, my God, my leftist friends really have black hearts. They're really not they're not in it the same way that I'm in it. And you have many people, though, who, thank God, are turning to Christ, seeing their lives transformed. Now, you were there, you witnessed all of the memorial events. Tell us about that. What did you see?
Oh man, the memorial in and of itself was so beautiful. I mean, it was truly the greatest event, gathering, revival that I've ever been to. My dad was an evangelist. He's traveled to over 14 different countries. He has spoken to tens of thousands of people. There's been a translator there. I mean, he felt the Holy Spirit in all these different countries that he was going to, evangelizing, preaching to these stages in Africa. I mean, in all different countries. Anyways, and he was there, and we were sitting on the floor, and he told me, he's like, Hannah, I've been all across the country. I've been an evangelist. This is something that I've never felt before. This is
Wow.
something that we truly have never experienced. I mean, of course, you've got Billy Graham revivals, which were huge, especially among my dad's generation and the previous generation before him. He is an incredible pastor, who's an incredible evangelist. I mean, his legacy continues to this day. I mean, we're hearing about his teachings and the wisdom and the knowledge that he shared and the lives that he saved during the wake of his revivals. But I mean, this is something even deeper right now, because the younger generations since forever have always been deemed as the not educated, or the not very intellectual, or not really paying attention. They care too much about their friends and
maybe
being
overeducated.
into relationships or video games or social media in more recent terms. But now it's like, there's a quote, it's easier to it's easier to tame a wild horse than to raise a dead one. And I almost kind of see that with my generation, because they're a little bit rebellious, they're asking questions, they're pushing back. And I think that's where we can kind of bridge the gap, because you've got the radical left young people who are coloring their hair all different colors, have piercings all over their faces. I mean, they believe that you can become a cat one day if you believe you're like the 60th gender. It is the most insane, bizarre things you've ever heard of. And then, of course, you've got even on the right, where people take things to the next extreme, and they want us to live in a theocracy, and they don't really have a clear understanding of what it means to be America first. You've got a huge wave of isolationists in the young Gen Z conservative movement. So you got two sides, and then you've got people in the middle. And I think Charlie Kirk really did an incredible job. Someone that I've never seen been able to do this. I mean, he's very intellectual. He's very knowledgeable. I mean, any subject you ask him on, he probably knows about it. And from the history to where we are today about the subject, but he was so good at really being able to bridge the gap from the radical left to even the radical right. And it was just so beautiful to see, because here you are in the stadium where you've got people who 2 months ago probably called themselves a liberal, maybe even voted for Joe Biden, maybe voted for Barack Obama. And we're there in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, for this memorial, because they realized that Charlie Kirk wasn't radical. Charlie Kirk wasn't fighting these crazy extreme ideas. No, he was fighting for three basic principles: faith, family, freedom. That's it at the end of the day. And ultimately, he's a martyr for Christ. He died for his faith. Within 2 minutes of being assassinated, he was sharing what he laid his life on the line for, what he said he wanted to be known for, and that was courage for his faith in Jesus Christ. So I definitely am so grateful to be there, to have been there on that day, this past Sunday at the memorial. But I think even going forward in the next coming months, I'm excited to see the fruits that come from, what a lot of people are calling a revival.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Let's talk about some of the issues that are facing Gen Z right now, and they are profound. 28% of Gen Z identifies as some form of LGBTQ or plus, and the plus is very expansive, as you know. That's 4 times greater than Gen X. Kind of shows me that born this way doesn't really work as an argument anymore, when 1/3 of young people can identify with something that, let's be honest, is politically chic right now. It makes you a sympathetic figure among leftists, right, to identify yourself as minority that way. But I see that really as the result of decades and decades of predatory indoctrination, mostly through our public schools, but also through the churches. Too many of these churches are very weak, through our television programming, all sorts of different influences that come in. Screen time, TikTok in particular. We know the CCP encourages this kind of degenerative content among young people here. I'm particularly interested in talking to you, though, about the effect this has had on young women. You see more than any other generation at all, this vast chasm between Gen Z males and Gen Z females when it comes to mental health issues, the LGBT stuff, even religiosity. What's your assessment of all of that?
Yeah, well, in my book, Last Chance to Save Our Republic, I do an extensive writing in the end of the book on the greatest issue I believe facing America, and I believe that is the breakdown of the family unit between one man and one woman. And ultimately, the reasons why we're facing these problems, an identity crisis among my generation, why you just said 28% of my generation is identifying with the LGBTQ movement, which is a very broad statement to make. I mean, it could be identifying as a cat one day, identifying as non-binary, or whatever new term
That's
they
certainly
want to
true.
make up. Yeah, and then you've of course got abortion and this population control movement of vaccinations, climate change. Don't have so many children, and so young people, men and women, are both the most unhappy generation, at least leading up until the past couple of years. We're the most unhappy generation that we've ever seen in prior times. And it's no coincidence. I mean, I really think when you indoctrinate, when you push this idea of evolution for decades upon decades, that you come from nothing, you're going to nothing. What does that mean? You're just a clump of cells. You're just really nothing. You're going to die like a dog. You're walking through Earth. Nothing really matters. And what's this like very humanistic, naturalistic mindset that really leads back to evolution, Darwin theory, and all of it, right? And so it's no coincidence that young people just think that if they, get pregnant out of wedlock, they don't want the kid. Well, they just go to an abortion clinic, they take a pill that starves and suffocates their child. It's no big deal because it's just a clump of cells. It's no coincidence that young men, young boys, I don't even want to call them men because they're not. A man is someone who leads, protects, and provides for the most vulnerable, the most innocent of our society. It's no coincidence that these boys, these beta boys that are 16, 17, 18 years old, are yanking elderly women and men down flights of steps. They're robbing them. They're doing some of the most egregious things to the elderly of our society, the most vulnerable that you could possibly imagine. It's no coincidence that we're seeing this. It's no coincidence that you've got the LGBTQ movement, this idea that if you feel like whatever one day, you can become that. It's very, this individualistic, I can do whatever I want. It's my truth. It doesn't matter what anyone else says. There's no such thing as objective reality, objective truth. It's no coincidence that we're fighting these things when you remove a basis for not just morality, which comes from God, because you cannot have a moral society without upholding the creator of morality, which is God. And our founding fathers understood that. John Adams said our Constitution was created for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate for the government of any other. I mean, 26% of political quotes in our Constitution come directly out of the Old Testament. I mean, everything about our founding, of our founding documents, I've got the Declaration of Independence behind me. Everything about our core founding documents and core principles was all surrounding biblical principles in a Judeo-Christian founding, because our founding fathers, those that came over on the Mayflower, understood that in order for this nation to thrive, it must be a nation founded upon natural law, meaning our rights do not come from man, they come from God. And then, of course, in the late 1800s, leading into the early 1900s, you have this surge of the feminist movement, the first, second, third wave feminism, and of course, the sexual revolution in the 60s, telling men and women that you can be whatever you feel. It's just a social construct. There's no difference between men and women. It's just really a social construct and whatever that society wants to make up. And then today, you've got men going into women's bathrooms. You're having a girls' sports crisis where men want to go into women's bathrooms. They want to go into women's sports. Of course, what really, ticked everyone off was when Riley Gaines had the trophy stolen from William Thomas. And this started to come to light. And people were wondering, how in the world did we get to this point? Well, ultimately, because we rejected God, we rejected a basis for morality. And number two, we allowed for the family unit to be broken down largely by the feminist movement, proving or trying to prove that there's no difference between men and women, which of course we know there is a difference. And ironically, the girls' sports issue is literally proving that feminism does not work. Transgenderism, even the normalization of pedophilia in our society by many senators in California, this is the logical conclusion of getting outside of God's design for mankind, God's design for male and female roles in society. So I believe the reason why we're facing all these problems is ultimately because we've rejected a basis for morality, which comes from God. And number two, we have allowed the family unit to be broken down and our roles to be totally misaligned.
What do you think of the trad wife phenomenon?
So you've got the boss babe movement, right? You've got the trad wife movement as well.
What was the first one? I don't even think I've heard of that one before. The boss babe?
Yeah, boss babe. Well, that's the whole other side. That's the I can
Okay.
do whatever I want. That's kind of
Okay.
even an
Yeah.
entity of the feminist movement, right? The trad wife movement, I think it has good intentions, right? I believe in traditional values. I think anyone with half a brain should understand, again, that God created a man for a woman, that we have very distinct roles. When it is embraced, you have a flourishing and a thriving society. When it is not, you see the results of what we're seeing today. And this goes throughout history. This is just a repeat of history. We've seen this throughout civilizations. I mean, even you look at the Roman Empire, one of the ways that they caused its collapse was because of emasculate men, because of the family unit being broken, and then there not being a structure for that civilization. But the trad wife movement, I think, you got a lot of these quote unquote trad wives on the internet, and it almost creates a very dystopian, unrealistic reality of what it means to be a masculine man or a feminine woman. And masculinity and femininity it's not an aesthetic, right? It's not something that looks cool or sounds nice on the internet. Like, some people making sourdough bread every day, living on a farm might be realistic for you. Or you might live closer
Right.
to the city and you might not be able to live off of one income, unfortunately, in this economy that we are in. So I think it's ultimately a heart posture. Like, to be in what God has created you to be, it's a heart posture. Masculine men are called to lead, protect, provide. Women are called to nurture. And you can find yourself in those things without being married. I'm 18 years old. I'm not married, but I'm still called to fall into that biblical femininity. And same thing for men. Even if you're not married, you can still be a masculine man that protects the most vulnerable in our society. So I think there's a lot of confusion around this. And like you said, you bring up the trad wife movement. There's a lot of good intentions, but we also have to remain realistic and not treat masculinity or femininity as some aesthetic that's made up by social media.
Changing gears a second, I've noticed that if you listen to interviews of, like, man on the street interviews of a lot of Gen Z men, they talk about Donald Trump as the first real role model for masculinity in their lives, which is great. I mean, I love that we have a president who's like that. It's also very tragic that you have to look to your president rather than your father, your pastor, and uncle, the normal males that you would have in a healthy family, and community, right? Is that a problem that you see? I mean, it's a good thing they're looking at him, but it's a crisis of mentorship. Is that your experience when you're talking to other people who are also 18?
Yeah, well, I mean, young people in general, I think for a long time, a lot of young men were looking up to, individuals like Andrew Tate. And of course, from a
Unfortunately,
biblical standpoint,
right.
yeah, but from a biblical standpoint, but even further from just a humanitarian standpoint. I mean, this man has a lot of issues. He's not a good role model for young men, and we could parse that out in many different ways.
Of course.
But most people can understand that. I mean, a lot has come out, and people are recognizing that he obviously was not and is not a good role model for young men, unless he were to have some sort of heart change. But yeah, it is tragic. It's sad that we have created such an emasculated society, such a weak society of men, of beta boys, as I call them, that young men are having to look up to our president for mentorship, for leadership, when that was designed to be not only the fathers, but the church. And again, that goes back to how we've even got to the point where we are today, where we're seeing these insane headlines or insane statistics, because if you do not have strong masculine men, strong families, you will not have a strong society. And I do believe the reason why Charlie Kirk was just assassinated, the reason why if anyone wants to look up to anyone, it's Charlie Kirk. I mean, if you don't have a solid mentor in your life,
Yes,
go
very
back,
true.
watch videos of Charlie Kirk. I mean, this man was a father. He admits his mistakes. I mean, if you go back and listen to his interviews, he'll talk about his past mistakes. He doesn't shy away from them. He acknowledges them, and he says, "Hey, I've made mistakes in my life. This is what I used to struggle with, and I don't want you to live in these struggles. I don't want you to live in bondage. Here's the way to be set free." Charlie Kirk is an incredible role model for young men. And I saw Tyler Boyer, who is the CEO of Turning Point Action right now. He said, Charlie Kirk came to convert the young men, and Erica Kirk is coming to convert the young women. And I think that's actually what's happening right now. Charlie Kirk came and he created this turning point of young who no longer were really looking for that mentorship in President Trump, who is an awesome president. I'm very grateful to have him as president. But now they're able to see that in Charlie Kirk, who's getting married. He's encouraging people to get married. He's encouraging people to have families. If you're not married, love your family, spend time with your family, cherish the time that you have with them, create a flourishing society with acknowledging what even creates the flourishing society in the first place. So yeah, it is a huge problem with emasculated men, but I don't know if you've seen these videos, but right now there's a ton of videos surfacing the internet right now of fathers of all different ages. They could have kids of all ages, but they're literally sharing their testimony of how Charlie Kirk has impacted their life and how since his assassination, they want to be a better father. So I think the shift from President Trump is now going to Charlie Kirk, which is incredible. You know, it's the fruit of even something as tragic as an assassination of a great, solid, godly man.
Yeah, exactly. Very well said. Hannah Faulkner, thank you for your time and for all you do. You're a blessing upon the nation, really.
Hey, you know what? I really appreciate you having me on. And I want to say this last thing real quick, because I know a lot of people are going to be listening to this and they're going to say, oh, you brought this young girl on. And I don't know how biblically oriented your organization is, or if you guys would call yourself a Christian organization. But I know there's people who are going to watch this and they're going to say, how dare you bring your religion into the argument? How dare you, bring your religious beliefs? And here at the end of the day, everybody has a worldview. To try to deny that you don't have a religious worldview is one of the most insane ideas that you could. Everybody has a religious worldview. Everybody's political decisions, political ideas is based upon their religious worldview. Either whether you're an atheist, whether you're a pagan, a hedonist, it doesn't matter. You all have a worldview. I'm going to bring my biblical worldview to the table. You can bring your paganistic, your hedonistic, or whatever worldview you have to the table. We'll debate those ideas out and we'll see which one creates a more lasting and flourishing society. So I just wanted to say that, because I think a lot of people, they love to bring that argument to the table, especially those on the left. And at the end of the day, we all have a worldview. We'll debate those ideas out just as Charlie Kirk did, and then we'll see which one creates a more lasting and flourishing society. I appreciate you having me on the show today.
It's Christ or chaos, and I appreciate your kind words. Thank you again, Hannah. I'm Hayden Ludwig, and this is Restoration Spotlight, a project of Restoration News, your source of headline-smashing investigative journalism for the America First movement. Check us out at restoration-news.com. And until next time, stay vigilant and trust in God.